So great. So let's go ahead and get started. Just want to welcome everyone to our collaborative court speaker series that we host quarterly with a QRI. The whole goal of our speaker series is to bring in different collaborative court experts to talk about what they're doing in the reentry space and try to learn from them and try to understand a couple of things that are going on in the reentry world, in treatment courts, in the legal system. And today I'm so excited because I'll actually be taking a step back and be having my colleague Stephen Asmus have our speaker series today with Judge Faruqui. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Stephen to do some introductions and introduce Judge Faruqui as well.
Great. Thanks, Wyatt, and thanks for having me today. Hello to all the guests. Maybe just a little bit about myself to start. I currently work as the director of a long-term residential treatment in San Francisco, kind of overseeing program operations and then a small team of staff and interns. Additionally, I work at AQRI alongside the Northern District, serving as the policy and community associate. Good afternoon, Judge Faruqui. Amazing that you're here. Thank you for being with us. Maybe we could start a little bit with your background, and you can tell us a little bit about how long you've been on the bench and what drew you to get involved in the collaborative courts.
Sure. Well, I'd say I'm lucky because I get to speak to you, Stephen. I think your background is pretty incredible. So I've been a federal magistrate judge for a little over 4 years now, I think, close to that. Yeah, okay, close to that. I looked at the calendar and confirmed. I was a federal prosecutor prior to that. So I guess when I tell people, sometimes they're kind of surprised. They're like, they think that maybe I was a public defender or defense lawyer. I maintain that I guess that there shouldn't be a huge daylight, and there isn't often between the way prosecutors handle cases and then become judges, and because we're supposed to be looking at, obviously that's a bit of a generalization, but we're really looking at trying to do the right thing, and it's certainly acutely more so as a judge. You're not there's no client, a prosecutor as the United States is their client, but as a federal prosecutor. But I don't think I was really familiar. My time as a federal prosecutor is working mostly in national security and cybercrime cases. Didn't really have cases that had a lot of arrests or periods of incarceration. And once I started, I mean, I didn't really know too much about what was happening in our jail. Because being in DC don't have a separate federal and state facility. We have one temporary jail for people to go pre-trial, pre-sentencing, I should say, and when people come back on writs and things like that. And so I was very lucky that the head of education at the time, Dr. Amy Lopez, she's very accessible to getting cold emails from random people. And so I sent a cold email and said, hi, I'm a judge and I don't know anything about the jail, and it seems like I should because I'm sending people there. And I feel like I ought to know where I'm sending people and, what's going on there. And she's like, come on down. And, I came to the jail, and my experience, Mark Howard at Georgetown has told me the same thing, is you get someone in there just once and then meet the people and see the opportunities for collaboration and the need, which is acute. You're hooked and you want to come back. And so for me, it was kind of off to the races there, but I guess I didn't know how to run or if I can torture the metaphor, what the path would look like. But I was very lucky to get in touch very quickly with Wyatt and Judge Beeler out in the Northern District of California. And, they told me about collaborative courts. We also have one reentry court in our courthouse that was started by Judge Walton, really of his own, sort of initiative. And a lot of what I think collaborative courts is there are probation officers, there's one in Boston, there's pretrial service agents, there's people like Wyatt who are nonprofits, and there are judges, there's clerks of court, courtroom deputies, people who want to take the initiative and just see, is there some ways to think about it in a more holistic sense, think about wraparound services and things as people get out. And so I was very lucky to get plugged into that sort of world.
Wow, that's amazing. A lot going on there. I'm looking, maybe we could start with how would you say that this role differs from maybe like your a traditional court setting and the approach to the collaborative courts?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is that, collaboration, there's a prosecutor who's really amazing he was speaking at our reentry court when we had our first class, and he just said, "This is my favorite thing to do." And I got a lot of head nods, I think, from probation, from public defender, from the judges, as myself and Judge Walton sit together on that court. And he said it's because it's the one time we're all working together. And he's like, it's not that I don't want you all to succeed. I want you to succeed for sure when I'm in a prosecuting case and things like that. But my role is different then. I have to be, it's very clear kind of what my lane is. And our collaborative court, it's very clear what everyone's lane is, that we're all making agreement together to try to work towards a goal on successful reentry. And I want to be clear, I think successful reentry, we should always define that. I say, to me, it's not catching a new charge, getting a new case. That's not successful reentry. Recidivism is not our goal. Our goal is home ownership, marriage, kids, maybe not kids based on mine, but whatever it is that someone wants to do. Good employment, not just any employment. We just don't want it to be, oh, we're here to just stop people from recidivating. That's important for sure, but we should always be doing that. I think the idea of collaborative courts is, how do we leverage our resources to try to help people achieve the very same things that I, hope and dream for.
Yeah, that's amazing. That makes me think that the collaborative courts have really taken a humanizing approach to the court system. That's phenomenal. You mentioned quite a bit of different team members just a minute ago. I'm wondering, how do you balance collaboration in the courts, and maybe what's that like working on an interagency team?
Well, so it's very common to what I used to do before, or natural to what I used to do before as a prosecutor. We work with Treasury Department on sanctions portfolios. We work with intelligence community partners. But the court is pretty unitary, and each judge is kind of. I always tell people we're a monotheistic religion with about like 350 gods or whatever, we all think we're just our one own person, unitary sort of higher authority, and we forget that we have other folks because we don't have to collaborate. We all have our own cases and things like that, and so I think what's interesting is this: we take a team approach, and so we meet together before our reentry court. We proceedings. We meet in chambers, the prosecutor, the public defender, the probation officer, and the other judge and myself, and we hear from what's going on. And they have ethical obligations for sure at the end of the day. The AUSA as well as the federal public defender. But one of the things that they do when they have these sort of obligations is, it's a pretty broad playing field. Is what am I doing to move things ahead, move the ball forward for my client, be it the United States or this defendant. So sometimes it means, not objecting to a sanction. So we had a location monitoring sanction for a couple of people recently at a hearing. Sometimes it means, terminating a supervision early. The government has done that on numerous amounts of our cases. And so I think everyone's still doing their job. Where it's all about public safety. That is a really important. It's up there right after we're trying to do justice. We're also part of justice is ensuring public safety. We're trying to do that all in our different way, but we can do it together. It doesn't have to be totally oppositional. I think what's fascinating to me is it's that we follow the participants' lead. So I have never seen in my time there a participant objecting when there's a sanction, because usually they're there because they want to be there. And so if they mess up, they want to own up for it and they want to get back on the right path. And so I think it's really cool to see that, the prosecutors aren't seeking a harsher sentence and the defendants aren't seeking a lessened sentence. And we all just come up with a plan together and said, let's do it.
Yeah, I think something amazing and key you said there is that collaboration isn't just stakeholders. Of course, it is primarily stakeholders, but you get the buy-in from the individual as well. And, what works for
it's the most important
individual.
one. Yeah, that's the most important one, because ultimately, I guess, the purpose of the collaborative court is to help this person fly. And if they're not interested in that, then it's not going to work. We have one participant, Mr. Graves, who came to our graduation ceremony for the last reentry court, and because he was curious about it, and his probation officer told him, not mandatory, not anything. He just came and showed up. And since then, he was so excited. He's like, I just want to be a part of something like this.
Wow, that's amazing. And so how does someone get involved? Like, what is the selection process like for participants to get into the collaborative court programs?
Yeah. So as a participant, we in DC have our, a model that's different than some others. We're looking for high-risk individuals for recidivism. We want to go after the case where people we think that benefits the public the most, it benefits that individual most. It's kind of a win-win. It takes more resources, but their reward is the highest. And so,
Mm.
the probation office works with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Federal Public Defender's Office to vet candidates for it. Judges refer people. We put it in a minute order because we want everything always to be transparent. And then the U.S. Attorney's Office and Public Defender's Office have to sign off. We've never had anyone they haven't, because they think we're pretty thoughtful in how we bring people into the program. I should say the probation office is thoughtful because they do all the work. As the judges, we just get to take the credit. But I give all the credit to our team at the probation office. They really do a fantastic job of finding individuals. And look, it's not like they're all even as high risk. It's not all easy, waters. I mean, we're in the beginning of our current reentry court class, and we've already had a couple people who've had sanctions imposed, non-carceral, thankfully so far. But we don't want just people who are going to come in who already were going to, be able to achieve those things, those dreams that I kind of mentioned. I wish we could help everybody, but we have limited resources. So we're trying to help the people who are at the highest risk because we think there's the greatest benefit.
Yeah. And so once a probation officer maybe identifies a potential client, and then he's vetted through the board, what is there a specific criteria or expectation that the participant is required to uphold while they're in the collaborative courts?
So for participants, I mean, it's you got to check in with your probation officer. It's doing the things that we talked about. Clean urines, that you're showing up to reentry court, you're being professional while you're in court. We don't have, like special conditions that we add in addition. It is greater supervision. I mean, we had someone who said, like, look, this is like, it's a lot of going to court. I think I don't really want to do this. And so that was that person's decision. And ultimately, I don't, right or wrong is not a question for me or, any other judges or anyone to decide. If someone doesn't want to take advantage of the program, it's entirely up to them. But again, because people sort of choose to be in the program, when I say there's more court, it's a greater obligation. It feels a little different when it's by choice.
Yeah. Something that's really been transformational is when I get to sit in those courtrooms and really see all the stakeholders that take the time and they come together and they say, you know what, I think this may help this person, and that holistic collaborative approach, it's radically transformational. Amazing. Is there maybe an anecdote of a client who has made an impression on you?
Well, I don't know if we have enough hours in the day, but I'll tell you one. Oh man, it's real hard. But the one that jumps to mind is Daryl Jefferson. We call him CEO Jefferson because he's got those kind of CEO skills. And so the other day, he's long since graduated from our reentry court. He's got a job. He's got an apartment. He went through a housing lottery and he had a building. He showed us on Zoom because he was started during the pandemic, and he showed us the apartment. He's like, I have a doorman. He's like, I never thought I'd live in a building with a doorman. And he got, through the city's housing lottery, got to be in, like, they had affordable housing in a sort of high-end building. And it's funny because the reason he jumps to mind is that a couple of weeks ago, we needed someone to find employment. So I said, I have this person who is a reentry court graduate. His name is Mr. Jefferson. I'm going to connect you with him because, I just text him and he's on the ready, always work, sleep, whatever. And I say, hey, I've got a guy who needs to talk to you. Can you talk to him and help him find employment? And he's found more employment than I think anyone, he's up there with our probation office as a whole. He's put easily, a dozen guys into employment. And so I was like, sure, I'll talk to him. And so the guy's like, great, I'll talk to him. And the defendant then came back. No, he's like, you didn't tell me, Baby D. I was like, I know that's because I don't call him Baby D. I call him Mr. Jefferson. And then Baby D, aka CEO Jefferson, called him. I was like, oh, that's Buckshot. Of course I know Buckshot. You didn't tell me Buckshot. I was like, again, I just know that these people by the names in court. But it's just amazing to see, his success story. There's so many things about it. And it all began with a probation officer. He always says it. I always give him all the credit in the world. And Mr. Jefferson always says, it's not me, it's my PO. Because he had a PO and he said, look, as long as I'm on this ankle monitor, it's driving me bananas. I can't get anything done. And I got to get rid of this ankle monitor. And his probation officer, Stallman, said, all right, we're going to do it. They said, if you got to have check in, you got to do A, B, C, and D, and he did A through Z.
Mm.
But
Wow.
he always said it because Stallman took that chance on him and cut the ankle monitor, which to me as a judge, frankly, feels like, what's the big deal, right? I mean, I never had to wear an ankle monitor, thankfully. And so for him, it was important on like a many levels, mental most important. And he just like, I'm not on that. I got a little bit of trust. And I mean, it was smooth sailing, but what makes him extraordinary to me is just that he's not getting anything out of paying it forward, and he just continues to pay it
Mm.
forward. I mean, truly, dozens of people he helps, reentry court and non-reentry court members.
Yeah, that's funny because last month we had a reentry court graduation, and the graduate shared. He said he gave a shout out to his probation officer and said, "I've never had a probation officer like this. This individual calls me just to ask me how I'm doing and how my day's going." And just the relationship and the rapport that gets built during this collaborative process is really incredible. We just heard a little bit about a success, wondering if there are any maybe significant challenges that you have faced with these programs.
Well, I'd say twofold. One is, I mean, as you said, we're reliant upon our community partners. They're extraordinary. We have Mr. Vincent Massey. I mean, I'd say if you had to track the success of our program, it's like a 3-part pie, and one part is our probation officer, Mr. Solomon. Judge Walton has an incredible life story and background where he really is able to connect. I mean, one guy said, "Look, you're the father I never had," and I mean, we were all getting kind of
Mm.
emotional in court, and you could see it. And the final and biggest part of the pie goes to Mr. Massey. I mean, Mr. Vincent Massey is just extraordinary. He's someone who spent a lot of time incarcerated. He got shot. He's wheelchair bound, and he finds a way to connect with guys. And he's all doing it pro bono for free, just like everyone else is helping us. I mean, no one puts in more time than he does. And so, I mean, Mr. Massey, I mean, Mr. Jefferson, he would say the same thing. Mr. Massey was the guy who took him from where he was to the next level. I mean, we have 12 people, per class, and everyone, they know that name, Mr. Massey. And so it's just a challenge not having the resources. I mean, we have so much resources to incarcerate people, but for collaborative courts, and they cost a lot of money. Do we have our probation
Mhm.
officers dedicated, spending all this time, the court is spending resources and things like that. But for community support, we don't have a lot. And frankly, the other challenge, unfortunately, it never had happened before. Last class, we lost multiple members to
Mm.
violence, and I mean, they died, and that had never happened before. And so these are guys who are living in the community, and um, they're not safe. It's hard for them to succeed.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. You mentioned, yeah, it does really cost a lot of resource. How do you address issues related to funding and treatment resources?
We just ask for a lot of help. I mean, we're blessed to be in the nation's capital, and so there's a lot of amazing nonprofits. There's a lot of faith organizations here that have supported us. We're able to get support through the Mayor's Office on Returning Citizens, MORCA. They also support us. Their director, Lamont Carey, has been a huge advocate. I mean, they had a program where they were giving out Google Chromebooks and 1 year of internet. And so he came, unsponsored. No, didn't request or anything. He just showed up and he's like, guys, I got Google Chromebooks for everybody up here, and with 1 year of internet connection. So you you see that there's a lot of sort of support from people without much prompting from us. Again, I
Mhm.
think like folks said, it's a great feeling, but yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, I know a probation office is strapped thin, and uh, if you make it a priority, it happens, and if you don't make it a priority, it will not. You got to be dedicated to it.
Yeah. Yeah, those are some challenges for sure. And so maybe moving from challenges to an area I'm actually really excited to talk with you about is the collaboration, because everyone I asked about you and just researching online, they said Judge Faruqui, he is a man that is able to connect people and foster collaboration. So just wondering for a couple moments, maybe you could share an example or two how you built successful partnerships with the justice system and beyond.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think just you've got to be yourself, and so uh, you know, I guess I'm lucky that I have, being in DC, I have friends who are, still having left the U.S. Attorney's office, a lot of friends who are there. And so connecting with the prosecutors in that program has been great. Um, you know, the defense bar I've been able to build a relationship with. I think the easiest, the gateway drug to collaborative courts is inviting people to come observe. And so I just try to get people to come whenever we can. There's a benefit of Zoom, even if someone can't show up. Well, we've had people from I know around the world who have, sort of stopped by to observe our proceedings. We've invited judges. We had the Sentencing Commission come and observe, which was great, which is, a bipartisan organization. Uh, you're just trying to meet people, like I said, meet them where they are. I don't sort of shy away from sharing my story. My mom went to community college, was raised most of my life by a single mother because my dad passed away when I was pretty young. And I think that, in terms of the participants, that has been critical, is that we place our participants in the jury box. They're not sitting at the defendant's table. And that, that we really try to talk about, Judge Walton and I, how we are more similar to them than dissimilar, because that's not something we typically talk about in court. And for me, at least, I don't know about others. I can't speak for them, but for me, I feel like I easily could have been sitting, if I was lucky, in that jury box. There's a lot of times where I could have made bad decisions or things like that. And, but for the grace of God, there I go. And I believe that. And so that we were just trying to narrow that divide, right? We're literally in the first session we was talking about, I said, like, I'm sitting up here real high and, you're in the jury box, so you're not all the way down there, but there's a divide. And our goal is to narrow that divide. One thing we do afterwards at the end of sessions, we come up and shake everyone's hands or dap them up. And, we had this great art installation team, this art exhibit called DAP as a Love Language, come by to observe and sort of talk about how dapping each other up is important. And it was meaningful. Literally yesterday, we had a conversation about, one of the guys brought up, he's like, I never thought I'd shake a judge's hand. And I just think you're shaking my hand. I don't think about that, or dapping each other up. And they just said that that was important to them. And so we're just trying to find the ways to connect. Like, it's just a human thing. It's not a judge, defendant, prosecutor, versus defense lawyer. It's just, we're trying to be people.
Yeah. It sounds like kind of the key element there to fostering this culture of collaboration is really just this this level playing field where everyone gets in it together and understands that to make to increase public safety, it's not an us versus them, but like it's an us and them, or it's just an us.
I'll say just an us.
Let's say that. Awesome. Well, thinking long term, what are maybe your long-term goals for these programs, and maybe how do you plan to achieve some of those?
Well, one of the things, we're the second federal court in the country to have a social worker. Basically that's all thanks to Curai and Wyatt. He sort of gave us the understanding of how he was able to do that in the Northern District of California, where, we're tremendously grateful. I think the goal should be for every federal court, if they have the resources, which we did, to have a social worker come in and, assist in the work that the court is doing. So it's not a part of the public defender's office or prosecution or probation. It's purely for the court. And for when judges say, like, hey, how come I can't do a bed-to-bed transfer for this person? Well, that person's going to go and build those relationships and vet them. Ours collaborate very directly with the probation office. Again, Wyatt sort of gave us the model, and we're very lucky to have followed that. But I think that's, a goal is expanding out the support services that we have. More courts can be collaborative. You don't have to have a formal collaborative court. We have multiple district judges who do reentry hearings and progress reports. One of the things that incarcerated people and returning citizens often talk about is, and I'm a firm believer in, it's just like any relationship. If you wait till Valentine's Day to just buy flowers, that's not good. Or if you only buy flowers after you do something bad, that's not going to work. You need to do the positive things to nurture a relationship 365 days a year, so I'm told by my wife. And so, when people succeed, probation officers know that someone got a job or something. We try to do a check-in. It doesn't have to be a hearing. It could be just a phone call to that person. Say, hey, I heard that you're under supervision. You got a job. Great. Trying to get people to bring their family members in for those positive hearings, so they have some positive feelings about the courthouse. So we had people bring their kids in when we had reentry court proceedings where people have done well, siblings, people, taking folks in. Come in and see how well your brother or son or nephew, husband, boyfriend is doing, and let's celebrate that. And so, we're just lots of people are doing this work. We're just trying to scale it and then get additional support where we can. Particularly, I think getting social workers in courts, through again like the work that AQRI is doing. That's pretty huge.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I love this therapeutic approach too to the collaborative courts. We had someone, one of our clients just recently, he learned how to send his first PDF, and walking with this individual to send that, and has now created this kind of rhythm where every time there's like a success in life, he calls and he says, "Hey, I just did this," or "I just did that," and it really is, it's so moving to just have someone call you to celebrate their little wins.
Yeah, that's the
Maybe,
secret. They think we're helping them, but it helps us to keep getting that energy to keep going forward.
yeah, it really does. It really does. Well, what advice maybe would you give to other judges or professionals that are looking to implement collaborative court programs in their jurisdictions?
Sure. I don't know. I would say call Judge Beeler, talk to Wyatt, talk to Dr. Amy Lopez, though that's my suggestion. I've been very lucky to ride the coattails of these folks and just sort of follow their lead. But I would give them the same advice I give law students, which is just be yourself. That's the key to being a good lawyer. And I think probably as a good judge is you've got to be honest and truthful. I mean, people can tell when you're not being genuine. And so whatever way that you can genuinely connect with people, that's what you got to figure out and then do it. Uh, I think that has made our program successful. And then, bringing in guest speakers, people who are doing interesting things from your greater network. It does not need to be law related, but just showing again that you care enough to bring people and those people care enough to communicate with people in the collaborative courts. I think that's been pretty helpful.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. And maybe before I bring Wyatt in to spearhead the Q&A, I'm wondering, has there been any surprises about working in the reentry?
Yeah, I mean, I never knew that I would be involved in this work at all. So I think this surprise is just how rewarding it's been, and how infectious the enthusiasm it creates among others where they want to keep doing that work. And so um, I just love doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to say thank you so much for letting me ask you a bunch of questions. But maybe I'll pass over to Wyatt and see if there's a couple more.
Yeah, there are a few more. Thanks so much, Stephen, and thanks so much again, Judge Faruqui, for joining. Before I get to the Q&As, I was hoping, to be honest, just have you repeat. I remember one time when we met in DC, I asked you about how you approach work-life balance, and you got a little upset at me, and you told me we need to think about happiness. And so I would love to just kind of get that on the record, so to speak, and have you share your approach to work-life balance.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I think again, I think it's important people do things that kind of fit for them. And for me, I don't think of a very sort of regimented work-life balance, which some of my friends are very disciplined about, and that's great. I think the goal of a work-life balance ultimately a happiness balance. And for me, as my son likes to always tease my wife, who's a runner, I'd rather get kicked in the face than go run for about 10 minutes. I don't care if it's weather or whatever. I can't stand running. But I have friends who they clock out at 5:30 and make sure that they run their 10 miles or whatever. And so I'd rather work all day on reading opinions, writing briefs, doing reentry work until 11 p.m. and I'd be much happier. So for me, a happiness balance is what I'm seeking. But my happiness also doesn't just come from work. It comes from family, comes from friends, it comes from doing nothing, right? Binging Netflix, whatever it might be. There are plenty of other things that bring me joy and happiness. I am very spoiled. My work brings me a ton of satisfaction and a lot of happiness. And so I feel very balanced in terms of happiness, and that although I work a lot, I'm doing things that I feel bring me a lot of satisfaction.
Great. Thank you so much, Your Honor. So I'll just go ahead and jump into the Q&As and just remind the audience if there's anything that you want to ask, go ahead and type in, or feel free to come off camera and I'll call on you in a moment. But Judge DeMarchi, who's one of our CAP judges here in the district, had a question about, I think, incarceration. So I'll just go ahead and read it off. She says, everyone in both of our programs has spent time in prison and have similar challenges, but are there unique challenges for people just completing their custodial sentences? And what is your approach to those challenges?
Yeah, I think that we don't have any diversion programs, and so all of our reentry work is focused on people post incarceration. I think I always recommend people watch The Last OG, a great TV show written by returning citizens with, uh, you know, Tracy Morgan, the great one. you know, and there are the things they see on there, people struggling to get licenses, struggling to get their birth certificates. You know, when people say, oh, you got to go get a job, and they go to their job, and when they get there and they apply, the job's like, look, you need to have an ID. It's okay, I'm going to get an ID. When they go to get their ID, they say, oh, well, you have a bunch of parking fines and things that you were accumulated and, got larger while you were incarcerated. So we'll get you an ID once you get money, but you can't get money unless you get a job, and you can't get a job unless you have an ID. It's very Kafkaesque. And so, um, you know, I think there's the small challenges. I mean, the biggest challenge for us in DC is housing. Our partners try their best to find, but we just don't have a ton of housing. I think employment, we're doing really well. Mental health treatment, we have a fair amount of providers. We've collaborated with some local universities for their support and other programs for people getting their PhDs or looking fellowship hours, but just housing, that's, and I mean, I can imagine only in San Francisco, it's even more acute. I mean, where housing is so much more expensive, but that is that's a big challenge for us. We also don't have a halfway house in DC. We had one in Hope Village. It got shut down because it was so bad several years ago, and so they've broken ground on a new one. But that's a big issue for us, not having a halfway house.
Okay. So I had another person ask, you do a lot of work in the community and with lots of different agents and organizations, or agencies and organizations. Is there an approach when you're talking to, I guess, 1Ls or law students in particular, about, your work in reentry in addition to kind of your work on the bench and as an attorney that you hope will kind of bring people in to the reentry field?
Yes, well, since the person is, I think they signed off, and I can especially embarrass them. So I saw AUSA Jamie Herbert on the line here, who is one of the most extraordinary, as you know, prosecutors, I think, in the country. I always remind people, look, you might think from listening to me, I was a public defender, but I'm a prosecutor. I think it's great. 1Ls, there's a huge crop of people who want to be public defenders, a very small group that want to be prosecutors, but prosecutors have an outsized influence on what happens in a case. To charge a case, how it's resolved, diversion programs, reentry court goes through again. We have support, full support from the U.S. Attorney's Office. So what I try to do is encourage 1Ls to think about getting involved with these types of programs from a judicial or a prosecutorial background. I think people naturally think of these things as being only the work of public defenders, and that's not going to work. We need to have greater buy-in. And so, it's not hard to sell people when they hear kind of stories of Mr. Jefferson or Kendall Callahan, the great work that they're doing. People are interested. And again, I hook them in by getting them to come just watch a session. We make all the summer interns come and watch the sessions. And I teach a class that students come, they always say like, wow, this is like, I didn't know court could be like reentry court. I said, it can. It's up to you to make it happen. And so hopefully that they will continue to scale out those programs.
Great, great. And so my colleague Jason Bell, who runs an incredible program at San Francisco State University called Project Rebound that helps people get degrees through the CSU system, he asked if there's any talks of certificates of rehabilitation offered to people coming out of federal prisons.
So one of the things that we do for our program, our reentry court, is we do give certificates for that program when people succeed. And Mr. Massey has created a mentorship accreditation program with his organization, and that people get certificates for that as well. And that's a fascinating idea to really expand that to the Bureau of Prisons. I took my mom in for, we started a program through Brave Behind Bars with MIT. I started in DC, collaborating with them, and they teach coding classes to coding skills to incarcerated people. And my mom's, first question was like, "Oh, is this going to help people get like a reduction in their, time in incarceration?" I was like, "No, not really." I mean, she's like, "Well, why are they doing this?" And I was like, they want to learn. It's pretty amazing. She's like, was blown away. And so I think, people are frequently surprised to learn that for some of the programming, there's not like a direct one-to-one benefit, or there's not like, accreditation or like necessarily recognition when people make these achievements. And so I think it's a really fascinating idea from Jason.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So unless there's any other questions, Stephen, I'm going to throw it back to you. Do you have any final thoughts about your conversation with Judge Faruqui or anything else that you wanted to share?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say thank you first for taking the time and also just getting to be my first interviewee, excuse me. So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure, Stephen. As I said, I think uh, unfortunately, just because when someone wears a black robe, everything they say, people think maybe it's funny and interesting, although maybe we actually know it's not. But I suspect that what you have to share, and I hope that you continue to do, is far more interesting and impactful. The things I say, you're actually on the ground doing the things. Your lived experiences are pretty incredible. So I hope you'll keep doing it. I think you did a great job.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Great. Well, thank you both again for taking the time on this Friday afternoon to have our speaker series, and thanks everyone for joining. We're going to figure out how we can get this recording out to people who are available or interested in it, and want to wish everyone a great Labor Day weekend. But Judge Faruqui, thank you again so much for taking the time, and we'll be in touch for our next speaker series that's coming up in November. So thank you everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thanks so much.